Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Command Q, the podcast for quitters. We're your hosts. I'm John Pelfrey.
And I'm Maari Casey.
And today we're going to tackle a subject that weighs heavily on every freelancer and small business owner's minds: rates. How do you advocate for yourself in negotiations? How do you assign monetary value to your work? And perhaps most importantly, how do you stand by that number? Here to help us out today is Nicole Guernsey, a financial advisor with lots of experience holding her own in the freelance world. Welcome, Nicole. So before you were a financial advisor, you spent 12 years in product marketing, both as a freelancer and as a traditional employee. What called you over to the financial side of things?
Yeah, so I would say it wasn't entirely product marketing. I definitely cut my teeth in all facets of marketing because I worked at startups to begin with. I have a master's degree in book publishing, and I started in book design. I have the weirdest career trajectory ever. And then, I really loved what I did, especially when I kind of specialized in product marketing and started to lead product marketing teams, right? I had developed my career in that. I loved it, but I did not love corporate. Corporate environments can be, I've had really great ones and I've had really, really, really awful toxic ones. And no matter how good an environment is, it can change at the drop of a hat, right? If your boss gets replaced, they restructure, the goals of the company change, and they can just really redirect you on a whim. They can be like, hey, we hired you to do this, but now we either need you to do this or we need to replace you. And so I think it affected me a lot when I was an individual contributor. It affected me so much more when I was running a team, and I realized I can't help these people. The powers that be are saying, here's what's happening. Go do it, go execute, or else. And I really got tired of not being able to truly protect these people that I have hired and mentored and valued and made promises to, right? Yeah. And I really got tired of not being in control of my own destiny. So I decided, I was part of a layoff in the early tech volatility a couple years ago. And I thought about, what do I want to do next? And I had freelanced before. And I actually didn't freelance right off the bat. I actually was recruited for a finance role and had never, ever considered it before. But I think I have a unique capability to see sort of the underlying skills needed, not necessarily the title, right? And I think that was what made me good at my former job and why I was good at building teams, right? Because I could see that, it's not about, I can't do math in my head. It's not about being good at math. I'm terrible at math unless I'm on a calculator on paper. But it's really about, what are the strategic problem solving methodologies and how do you think about it? How do you help people understand their situation and translating that for however they need to hear it? Just like translating marketing copy for whatever audience you're speaking to, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you really try to be a guide? And so I value that sort of mentorship, leadership side that I had in my old career a lot. It meant a lot to me. And I wanted to do something that allowed me to continue to do that. And not for nothing, I'd had a really bad experience with a financial advisor in my divorce. And when it was first positioned to me, I was like, absolutely not. I'm not going to sell insurance for a quota, wear a pantsuit. I mean, I was in tech. I'm covered in tattoos and I have a nose ring, right? I am not going to try to just help the rich get richer. And, my initial gut reaction was absolutely not. But then I thought about it, and the recruiting hiring manager was like, hey, we do things a little different here. Why don't you think about this? Because you can build your own practice. You can do your business your way. And I think your personality would fit well. So I did look into it. And I thought, what's the worst that can happen? You can always go back to marketing, right? And I fell in love with it because I get to now, one, be the kind of advisor that I wished I'd had. And two, I really do feel like I'm helping people. All day, every day, I do things that I get to watch that light bulb moment of someone getting it or, being very excited about what their finances could do for them. Right. Instead of just our straight up save into your 401k, retire, get Social Security, die. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Max out your IRA every year.
yeah,
Do all the things. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Start the kids' college fund.
Mhm.
Yeah. Interesting. So what do you think a couple of those skills were that you were able to take from the marketing world that you left and now put them into the financial side? Like I'm sure that part of that is listening and synthesizing information. And you touched on that. Are there other skills that you feel like sort of translated over?
Yeah, I think I used to joke that I was a professional translator and somewhat of a professional storyteller, right? And so obviously the listening, active listening, being able to ask the right questions to understand, I think a lot of people think product marketing and they're like, oh, you're selling products or you're helping, the product team release a product with features. That's not what people buy, especially if you're dealing with like products and companies. They're buying what the product does for them. What does it solve for? Does it solve their pain of, not being able to automate their to-do list? Whatever the pain point is and what they care about is why someone buys. It's emotional. And it's the same reason if you're not dealing with a product, you're dealing with a freelancer. People buy the person, not the product. They buy the personality fit, the skills, the value of the interaction. And that's why, I think people really like me as a financial advisor now, because I'm my joke, my tagline is I'm not your father's financial advisor. I am 100% authentically myself all the time, cuss words, tattoos, all of it. And I think people really like that because they know that I am there and they could see me outside of work and I would be the same person. And I just really feel like authenticity and learning to identify what people really care about was the biggest thing in marketing that helped me translate careers, but also helped me be successful in freelancing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just that feeling of trust. You're gaining trust in people. They're trusting you. And you have a connection and a shared goal together. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah. And like you said, listening, like making people feel heard. I mean, most of the time someone's not like, oh, I want you to build me a website. And they're like really excited to have a website. They're really excited to have a virtual storefront brand representation of their business, right? Or they're excited to have this public face that they have no idea how to create. And what are the things that are important to them that go on that public face? A website is a website, right? It's just like building blocks. You could go do it on your own in Squarespace. What they're asking for when they contract with someone is, how do you make me stand out and translate my dreams or my values or my differentiators into something that people immediately see and go, I want to work with them or I want to buy that.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone knows that money and work go together. Mm-hmm. So why does that money conversation tend to feel so awkward especially with freelancers, right? We have a hard time with that.
Yeah. Well, as someone who talks to people about money all day, every day now, and as someone who was on the other side of the table and felt so awkward and like almost shame for, having to try to be like, here's my rate. Hope you think I'm worth that. Right. I've been on both sides and now I know that shame is the number one thing, but also our society has historically always made money a taboo topic. A lot of times around like, oh, well, you shouldn't talk about what someone else makes. Right. And there's two sides of that. Even there's the side of the corporation not wanting you to know that maybe you're paid unfairly or someone else's, right? But there's also the side of, if you make significantly more than someone else, that might leave a feeling of inadequacy, right, to the other person. And so kind of like politics, it's considered gauche or rude to talk about. But all of that comes back to that sort of shame and guilt and trying to value yourself as a freelancer or value your life, right? This is how much it costs me to live, or this is how much I don't pay attention to my finances. And now I call it ostriching, right? Like head in the sand. I don't pay attention. And so I don't really know. And there's shame around that. And so it always goes back to shame, I think is the underlying emotion. But I think, when it comes to valuing your skills and trying to figure out what you cost as a freelancer and what you want to charge, most people understand that time is money, that people's time is worth something. And that if you're providing value in any way, shape, or form, you deserve to be compensated for that value. And I think that's where freelancers, especially, but anybody trying to charge for their time, miss the mark. There's like this feeling of guilt that you're taking money from someone for something that you're doing and you're not valuing it to a dollar amount.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of creatives kind of share this perception that they shouldn't be interested in money, or that it's like the work should come first, the quality, like, this painting, like you should buy it because it's beautiful and you love it, right? There's this feeling of it's squishy and I can't narrow it down and put my time and energy and effort into one thing. How do you think, especially for creatives, how can we reframe their mentality or the conversation that they have with themselves about that squishiness and maybe make it a little more solid? Like Maari and I, we obviously talked to a lot of freelancers, and Maari came up with this like brilliant idea several years ago. I don't know, it could have been before I even started working with her. But it was this idea of like productizing your services, right? Like you put them all together and you make it easy for people to say yes to you. You put a chunk of services together and say like, you can buy package A or package B or package C, and then here's the platinum level, and you can get unlimited access. And it's the same way that, software is sold or whatever else. And I always thought that was really, really smart. Are there ways that we can help to reframe that mentality for freelancers and creatives?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go ahead and say, I don't know if I can help reframe the person who's like, materialism sucks and I just want to live on rainbows and butterflies, because you can't, right? It's not like that it happens anywhere in the world. So you need money to live. And I think there is I deal with people a lot who are like, well, I don't want to be wealthy. And I'm like, well, do you want to be able to support your lifestyle? Do you want to be able to travel? Do you want to be able to give to charity? Do you want to be able to do things that give back? That building of wealth is not to make yourself wealthy or other than the average everyday person. It's to help you do what you want with it. It's just about freedom. So I think that would maybe be my answer on that end. On the productization and helping value your time, I have two thoughts on that. One, so that I think what you talked about, Maari, like the basically deciding how to package things, and so then it's easier to put a price tag on it. I do think that that's super. It can be super strategic, super helpful, but then you can also fall into the rut of, and this depends on what you're freelancing on, right? But if you're packaging certain services and they cost different things, then you have to track down to the minute of what you're spending your time on for each individual service. Especially, and I don't know if you're like me, but I can't. I jump around. I'm working on 80 things at once. I charge a flat rate. Do I track my time and I somewhat track what projects I worked on in that time? Yes, that is it. I cannot track down to like, oh, I worked on web design for this much time and that charges differently than the copywriting that I did. I can't do that. So I think it is very helpful to package and productize, but it also has to make sense for the service that you're providing in your own lifestyle and mentality.
Well, I think that the reason we're talking about productizing it was the biggest thing with money that we see a lot of is that people tie it so much to their self-worth, and it shouldn't be. It's especially, we see it a lot with women. We see a lot of people who are nonprofit builders, and when I say I talk several times to people who are building nonprofits, and I'm like, they're like, of course, like I feel so bad on charging this because it's nonprofit, and then they're just trying to help. And I'm like, yeah, but if you don't charge, then you're not going to be around next year to save the trees or the whales or whatever you're saving. So you have to charge. But I think the biggest thing is like a lot of times John and I will talk about how can you remove an emotional part of it when you're making that negotiation? Because like if I walk into a room and I'm tying my own self-worth with what I'm asking for, then it feels really uncomfortable because it's like, am I worth $75 an hour? It's like, well, I need $75 an hour to keep my lights on and feed my dogs. So it's like, yes, I'm $75 an hour. Like, there's no apologies. Like, this is very functional. Like money is a tool in this sense. And so a lot of what we talk about too with whether you're productizing, whether you're charging hourly or flat rate, it's like you have to back up from that initial number negotiation and be like, what is behind it? Like behind it is like my mortgage, diapers, rent, whatever. And then on top of that, the value I'm bringing, the years of experience, like whatever the market will bear. And then that's a number that's like not emotional. Because it's like when money becomes emotional, then that negotiation becomes pretty uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I'm on the board of a nonprofit organization, so I totally understand that.
You've dealt with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it goes back to, are you providing value for whatever service that you're collecting money for? If the answer is yes, or you intend to provide value with that money, right? You're giving it back to charity or whatever you're doing with it. If you are providing value, baseline, does it help someone else? Does it help a company make money? Does it help a person feel like they got to do something good in the world? Whatever that value is it worth money? Yes. So I think that you nailed it, Maari, around how do you take the emotion out of it? It was actually something I was going to talk about today because I have kind of a strategy for how to price yourself. Obviously, and it really does go back to taking the emotion out of it, which is one, obviously knowing what the market will bear. So researching average rates, and sometimes it's really amorphous and hard to find that information, but just do your best to collect like 3-4 data points on what's happening, even like researching on those platforms. Like Fiverr and all that stuff, just to see. Now, a lot of times those are people in like Bangladesh charging like $2 an hour, right? So that's not the best example, but you can kind of weed through and figure out what's relevant to what you do. The second thing is actually calculating backwards. And this goes back to the finance side. So you mentioned your mortgage and what you need to live, and obviously you need those things, and so your time is worth that. Well, if you think about your salary versus maybe not salary, what you need to earn, how much is that really? So start with the calculation of what do you need to live? And I don't mean that like we want to start there and only earn what you need to live, because that doesn't help anyone, right? But start there and then work backwards and then mark up accordingly. So I have a calculation in my head, but I want to make sure we want to dive down that path before I continue. Okay.
That's why we're here. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give an example. If you wanted to work and earn, let's say you needed $5,000 a month to live. That's what, like mortgage, all of your utilities, your subscriptions and some shopping and groceries and whatever else you need to live, $5,000 a month. You're then thinking that's like net, right? So you're not living off $5,000 a month, and then at the end of the year you pay taxes. So then you're in deficit, right? So your net is $5,000, which means you need $6,500 approximately gross each month to live.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that mean you're working 40 hours a month every month and you never take a breather or get a day off? Hopefully no, right?
Yeah.
So then you want to kind of build in a little bit of padding. So if you multiply that for the year, so you need $6,500 gross. That's $78,000 a year, 12 months. But you're not working every day. You're maybe working at, 70% capacity. So if you think about that, it's like maybe you're working 30 hours a week, 48 weeks out of the year. Right? Because filling every hour of your day with freelance work can be really, really challenging. So you don't want to account for 100% of your hours. If you do happen to fill every hour, great, that's a bonus. But we're not accounting for that. So then, estimate 70% capacity plus, flexibility for time off or whatever. Then you're having to charge $54 an hour. Base.
Base.
That is like break even. You're living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
So then you think about this. You've got expenses. Maybe you've got subscriptions you have to pay for design products, or you have to pay for materials to produce, your Etsy art or whatever it is. Then you got to account for expenses. People have a hard time tracking expenses. So I would say at a minimum, 10% is a rough estimate. But if you can track your expenses and figure out what percentage of your costs, your expenses are for your job, use that, maybe a little bit of padding because some months are higher than others, right? So account for expenses and then you up that by 10%. But then you've got, I don't think people really account for this. If you're working as a self-employed individual, you're not only paying normal income taxes,
Right.
you're also paying what we call FICA taxes, which are like the federal Social Security, Medicare, self-employment taxes. When you're in a W-2 job, you do pay some of that, but your employer pays about 50%. So you're kind of getting a discount to have a W-2 job. You're paying 100% of that as a self-employed individual, which is 15.3%. So if you think about if you're in the $78,000 tax bracket, you're at a 12% roughly tax rate, but then you have a 15.3% tax on top of that and state taxes, right? So this goes back to the finance world. So if you add on, 15% for like, let's say taxes, 15% for what I like to call the pink tax, which we'll hit that in a second. So all in, you're marking up by about 40%. So if you want to make $78,000 a year, you're actually needing to make more like $108,000 a year-ish, somewhere in there. Around a little over 100,000. I mean, you can fiddle with those numbers. Some of it's double counted and it's double counted intentionally, right? You want to be able to save and live. And I think people don't do enough of that, like, oh, here's something to live, but also then I'm not saving anything. Right. You need to be able to put stuff into that pre-tax IRA because then also you're lowering your tax liability and keeping more money in your pocket instead of paying all of that taxable income. Right.
So, I think it's hard too for people because especially when they start out, we always call it the hunt, kill, eat mentality of like everything. I'm taking everything and I'm just going. And I think it takes a couple of years, a lot of times for people to get to where they're saved. Now I'm adding money into savings and now I have an IRA. And also we always say just the lapse in work. You have to account for the fact that there's going to be some weeks and some months or some COVIDs or whatever that could pop in and all of a sudden work dries up for a period of time. And I think that's really hard because, especially when you're switching from like a full-time job into freelance, you are mentally thinking like, I have the capacity to do 40 hours of work. The difference is like now you have to go and get it and it has to be given to you. And so I think that was one thing I remember thinking, like realizing early on, it's like, okay, even if I have 20 or 30 hours of availability, it doesn't mean I'm going to fill it 52, 48, or even 40 weeks a year. So I think that's like a hard jump for people to get to where they've covered themselves for those lapses in work, or if they want to take vacation or maternity leave and that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. And you're thinking the split between billable work versus business admin, right? You don't get to charge for your administrative hours. So if you're only working 30 hours a week billable work, those other 10 hours a week are marketing and getting clients and dealing with your invoicing and all of that, right? So there's that. There was something you mentioned earlier about negotiating, like walking in and trying to feel confident in a room. Like, what do I say that I am worth? And, obviously we talked about taking the emotion out of it. It's not about what you're worth. It's about what you're providing, what that's worth to them. But at a minimum, when you walk into that room, you need to know what that range is, right? First of all, you should always pre-price, right? Like, doesn't matter what they think they're going to get. Your price is your price. And especially your minimum. If you need $54 to live at a bare minimum, your minimum is $70 an hour, right? Like, just graduate a little. And you don't work for less than that. And if they can't pay it, that's not a great client. I have a minimum. I mean, my friends and family discount is $100 an hour. And people will pay it because I help them and they know and they get it and they're really grateful. I think that too many people fall back on the old school in-kind trade mentality. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. And you have to be so careful. What if you're scope creep and suddenly you're doing this huge project for someone and it takes you 20 hours, but what you get back from them is only worth, maybe it only took them 2 and it's not worth that much to you. So got to be careful with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So most of us start out pricing our services low, right? To try to get clients to build a book, to build a portfolio, to get some referrals, all of that kind of thing. We do it to gain experience, but how do we get past that part of it, right? Like there is a time where you kind of graduate into, okay, I've got work coming on my ears, or maybe I need to find a person to help me with doing some of the assistant work or some of the basic level things. But how do I know when that place comes?
Yeah. So just as a best practice here, just if you're putting, you're creating your scope of work, you're building in your services contract, put a 3% cost of living increase in that price. Automatic. They sign it. You get to charge a 3% increase year over year on the contract date. Just bump your price up 3% for every client. Just best practice, right? Because I don't think people realize, first of all, inflation on average is about 3%, but the past few years, inflation was like 5-6%. So obviously price vary, right? Is the topic of conversation right now.
Sure.
So just build it in.
We'll see.
Exactly. Yeah. Just build it in automatically so you don't have to have that awkward conversation, right? Your cost of living increase is built into your yearly contract. The other thing I would say is, really, it's all about documenting everything. So documenting the time you spent on each product and what that output looked like, how fast you start to get, right? Because once you start doing stuff, you're really efficient. I get to a point where I've got I've built so much that I've templatized things, and it does not take me an hour to do something anymore, right?
Right.
I can do that thing in 5 minutes. But I still charge the hour because it would have taken me an hour if I started from scratch with the thing that I built, right? And just because I'm not rebuilding it every time doesn't mean I'm not providing that same time value to the client.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's a question of value versus the time you actually spend, right? And that goes back to sort of your first point about what's the value that I'm providing to my client.
Exactly. So, but I still document everything comparatively. And the reason why is because I'm at the point where a lot of my clients will say, a lot of the freelance clients and the work that I do is people who have worked with an agency, right? Where they get, maybe they're charged $10,000 a month retainer. And what are they getting to show for it? They're like, they did this project, they did these 3 blogs, they did this. We didn't like any of it. So document feedback you're hearing about their services with others, document the feedback you're getting, document everything, then start documenting how much time does it take you to do the same thing, right? Oh, they charged you 5 hours to write a blog post and I did it in 1. So then I'm worth the time of 5 agency people, right? So document everything and start to consider those factors into your costing. And then I just did this with a client where I was like, hey, I'm upping my prices by $50 because 1, they have decided to continue to give me more and more work without a discussion of hey, can we give you more work? And 2, they've consistently complained about their other contractors, which were all agencies, and said, we want to just keep giving you more hours because we don't like what they do and they're not worth the time. And I said, well, you can put me on retainer or you can charge, you can have this billable number. And they didn't want to do the retainer because what if they don't hit that hour number? And that's been their problem with their agencies. And I said, fine, well, then I'm going to charge you $200 an hour. And because it's also convenience, right? So it is harder for me because I don't know what projects are coming down the pipe. I don't have dedicated, allocated hours for them. And if they have a week where they need 15 hours of my time and a week where they only need 5, that's challenging for me to manage.
Right.
They're paying for you to be kind of on hold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's it's interesting too when you've had the conversation around when you're kind of graduating your rate and you start in a certain place and maybe you have the same client for years. And we were talking about this yesterday about you always want to fire your first client. And how do you ask a client that started at this rate to get to this rate, and all those kind of uncomfortable things. And I've seen people do it in a couple different ways. And one way that I always think is really pretty successful is most companies are doing their budgeting like in end of Q3, first of Q4, right? And so I've seen people come in, and they've done this with us too, where they say, hey, we're getting towards the end of the year. Just to let you know, my rate will go up blank percentage starting Jan 1. And I really like that because it gives the client the opportunity to adjust or have conversation and like factor it into their budgeting versus, December 31st being like, tomorrow is going to cost, 7% more. I think that's a really nice thing. It's a nice way to do it and create conversation. And then that way, if if they're like, hey, we can't do it and you need to part ways, it gives you time to like prospect and look for a new client. So I think that's a really successful way to do it. And it always has been, it also allows the client to have conversations if they need to backfill you because they can't afford you anymore. It gives them time to do it too. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I would add to that, like, make sure the client knows that you're open and you want to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen it before where there's not a lot of good communication around the hard stuff between a client and a freelancer. And then the client is like, oh, you're upping rates on me. All right, bye. And there's just like it's like dead in the water. That's it. End of discussion. Mm-hmm. And trying to have a good relationship around those hard conversations. I know it's really challenging and scary, but just being like, hey, making sure you're giving them notice. It's 60 days out till the contract turns over. Remember, we have a 3% cost of living increase. Also, I need you to know that, so that's the automatic increase, but you have a clause in there that says you can change your rate at any time after the at the contract date, or whatever that is. Hey, also, I'm sure you've seen what's going on with the price of eggs. Something I do involves eggs. I don't know. I'm just kidding. But like, you know what I mean? Like, I really do need to add this much more markup, but I want to make sure that we talk through it and address your needs. And if there is a need for a change, we have a really good transition plan. And, you're going up and saying, I realize I might not be able to handle your needs anymore, but I want to work with you to try to make it as smooth and the least disruptive I can. And I want it to be a conversation. And as long as you keep doing that, like, people will usually appreciate that communication so much more that they will pay for whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. The idea that like, hey, I'm asking for this thing and I understand that it might be out of your budget, but I'm willing to help transition this over. It extends an olive branch into the conversation that maybe they weren't expecting or that they don't hear very often from any of the other freelancers that they work with, right? Because other freelancers just say, hey, I'm raising my rates by $20 an hour, done. And then you're saying like, I need to raise my rates because the cost of eggs have gone up. I like to eat eggs. I need protein. And because of that, I understand if you can't take that on, I'll help you, in the transition when you find somebody new. And then also that's a runway for you to plan in the future. If you're helping with the transition, if it's ending, you'll have an idea of when it's ending, and you might be months out being able to plan that as part of your income strategy. That's really smart.
Absolutely. It benefits both parties. And I think more often than not, it results in the contract not terminating or being on such good terms that they'll still refer you or, use you part-time, whatever it is. But I think so many people are afraid to introduce the concept, the idea of like, well, we don't have to work together anymore because they think someone's going to be like, okay. I see it. For years, I trained salespeople. And now that I work as a financial advisor, which I don't consider myself a salesperson, and that's just how I run my practice very differently. I do not sell. I plan. I help people plan and understand. But I see so much of that gross sales culture. And it's basically like, fluff up your peacock feathers, show the bravado, never show weakness. And they'll just handle what you throw at them. They'll take it. They'll swallow it. You're the expert or whatever it is. Yeah. If you don't have a really good relationship with them, well, one, to your point, 99% of other people in any interaction are doing it that way.
Right.
But two, if you don't have that sort of working relationship with them, of course, they're not going to want to stay and work with you and talk to you or tell them they're vulnerable and maybe tell them that their business is going, hey, we just lost 2 people. We're really struggling, or whatever it is, you want to make sure you have an open line of communication with your clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always talk about how it's important to like lead with empathy too, because I think a lot of times freelancers, like they don't see themselves as a business. Like they're like, I'm just making candles or writing copy. And I'm like, you're a business. Like you are a legit business, just like Nike's a business and like this is a business. Like everyone's a business. And I think I've found that people have the most success when they approach a business relationship as a business. And so if I was to go to somebody who I was working with and say, hey, I want to raise my rate. And they say, I can't do that. And you say, that's fine. Let me help you transition. Like I know a junior copywriter who's been working with me subcontracting, and I'd love to intro you. Her rate's a little bit lower, blah, blah, blah. Then it's like you're kind of meeting them at the table as a business owner. They understand you need to grow your business. And you can kind of even say that, like, my business is growing and you've been a big part of it, but blah, 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 blah. Then it's like a shared experience, and it's not like you are their vendor and, you're just kind of cutting it off, So I think that's a nice place. And that's something that I see a lot of more senior freelancers understand after a couple of years. It's like, we're all businesses. We're all just trying to, cover our mortgage and make it and do good work. And so I think that's where people find the most success and build stronger relationships. Even if the relationships end, it's okay.
Yeah. And businesses are relationships. They're not transactions. I mean, in my opinion, I know that other people view business as purely transactional, but to me, it's a relationship. And when you're talking about something like freelancing, or I'm a small business and I'm working with a larger business or whatever, cultivating that relationship on a professional level and saying like, I'm going to be there to support you when you're in trouble, and I'm asking you to support me when I've decided to either move on or whatever. Or if you need me and you're short people, like you said, I'll chip in as much as I can to help you out through this hard time. That goes such a long way. When I've sat on the other side of the desk running a project management team at an agency, when I know that I have a freelancer like that, and even if they cost a little bit more money, if I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm in trouble, can you help me out? And they do, man, does that make me loyal to them.
Yep.
I mean,
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
what I like about both your examples are, you're talking about approaching it as a business, but you're not talking about approaching it as a institution or transactional or anything. You're still a person and you're still bringing empathy, but you understand when I think more so than a business, you're approaching it as the value for time, right?
Yeah.
Time is money. Value needs to be money. And, you hit the nail on the head. Like, people do business with people, the relationship, not, you can get, there's, 3 million people out there who could probably build you a website. I don't know, I'm exaggerating, but but at least, there's definitely people who do certain things like design and certain things better than I do. But what, the value that I add, whether it's one, the relational, or two, the ability to work very quickly, right? You can only have you have three things. You have quality, quantity, or quickness, right? So you can only have, if you need it really fast and you need it to be high quality. Sorry, not
good, fast, and cheap.
Good, yeah. Thank you. I was like that one. I was like, I'm buying.
The three-legged stool.
Yes, the three-legged stool, right? You can only have two. You can't have something good and fast, but it's not going to be cheap, right? Like it doesn't work that way. So I think really understanding that, and as you sort of put down your roots as a freelancer and start to own yourself, which I don't know if have you heard of Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, Your Body Language May Shape Who You Are?
No.
Yeah, she's great.
So
we have a couple body language people, and we really love and find that world so fascinating.
Yeah.
I would say that actually her TED Talk, and I was probably 25 when I was introduced to it. So it was a long time ago. But it was right when it first came out, and someone told me to watch it. And that was a turning point for me in my career. I had been this sort of timid freelancer. I was also working in a salaried job in a tech company, and I had a really hard time sticking up for what I thought was right, or what I, bringing out my voice in the room to kind of talk through these big project ideas, even though I knew I was the one with all the information, right? Had a really hard time with that. And then I watched a video on it, the whole idea of power poses, and just trying to really almost not fake it till you make it, but fake it until you become it, because you're sort of those the body language poses, and also just like, what are they called when you like give yourself affirmations?
Mm-hmm.
It can really actually shape your ability to have that confidence to enter into that negotiation or put down your price and just say, that's it. And know that you're not going to be the right fit for everyone. Not everyone's going to be able to pay for you. And that's okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Small little plug for Command Q. If you want to go back and listen to episode 3, it's our interview with Terry Vaughn, who is our sort of version of that. He's a body language expert, and it's a really fun conversation. So I encourage you to check that out. And everybody else listening, tiny little plug there. But yeah, absolutely. We love to talk about things like body language and nonverbal communication, communication in general. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit now and let you talk about the Rebel Women's Social Club. I know that you've got this set up on Facebook. It's a Facebook page, and so part of that mission is to encourage women to advocate for themselves professionally. What do you think some of the particular challenges are for women in business, especially small businesses, right now in 2025?
Yeah, well, so it's no shock to anyone. I'm a radical liberal. Aside from the current climate has made me, I always used to have these beliefs, but it's made me much more proactive and involved in creating these kinds of situations. Like I said, I joined a nonprofit as a board member, and then I've got this group, this women's group that I run. And, a lot of it was slow realizations. I mean, I had experienced a lot of like corporate, we'll say like, I don't even know if you could say outright discrimination, but like corporate unconscious bias against me as a woman. And, we earn, I would just say even outside of business, like if you just take women, right, period, outside of what you do, we on average earn 83% on the dollar to a man. Even if you're in a high tech, like STEM, like higher tech, higher, more advanced degree job, profession, you are earning about 90 cents on the dollar. So you're still not 1-to-1. We are charged more, right? I talked about the pink tax, but I think the pink tax actually, it goes beyond just the whole like concept of, women are charged more for their, menstrual products. They're charged more for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bunch of studies out there, personal care products, obviously like hair, lotion, makeup, all that stuff. It's like 13% more. Clothing is 8% more. And you think about that. So we're paying on average somewhere between probably 7 to 15% more to live. And then we earn 83%. So we're making 17% less.
Yeah, that math doesn't add up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just women, period, regardless of what you do. But in the business industry, and this is actually something I noticed as a single woman after I went through my divorce, and I bought my own house, and I had to get I was very proud of that, right? It was like, I did it. I did the thing that they said millennials would never do, is buy a house. And I did it all by myself, and I was very excited. And so it's a 30-year-old house, and I have issues, like it has things that need repaired or things. I live alone, and I am a woman. So I would have these people come in and give me quotes. And even if it was a woman giving me a quote, which is rare because in that industry, in sort of like the home renovation, builder, repair industry, construction, not a lot of women in general. But even if it was a woman, my quotes were higher than if I had my neighbor come over and just be there with me.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
So, yeah. So there is a whole socioeconomic bias that you can charge women more, that you can get away with charging women more. And that goes for business owners as well in both directions. You can charge them more for what they need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're shopping around for prices on your supplies, lady, so you can charge them more. But you can also pay them less. You're immediately undercut just by the fact that you're a woman. So being really strong in my gender does not determine my value is critical as a female business owner. My gender does not eliminate my seat at the table or create an obstacle to my seat at the table. You'll feel it. You'll walk into a room full of men and you'll be like, I can already sense that like I'm getting this condescension attitude, or like, oh, honey, I had an ex-boss who's very toxic, which I still have PTSD from that job, but he used to call me little girl. And I was like 36. Still so, it's just, and he was not that much older than me. And he was like 45. So like, there's this whole concept of you have to stand your ground. And what I don't think women realize is you don't have to be a bulldog about it. You can be really direct, and you can be empathetic, and you can embrace your power in the feminine and having emotion and all that stuff, and still emanate power and own your right to be there and own your value, while, being able to embrace the feminine side of yourself. And I think that what women don't realize is we have superpowers. We have secret power, and that we listen better. No offense. But like we listen differently. Let's put it that way. We listen differently. And the things that we hear are more qualitative than quantitative. And because of that, we actually adapt our ability to serve clients better, right? Because we hear things that a man might not hear. We emote and process emotions differently. So we tend to be more empathetic. And we also put a lot more thought and take a lot more time in how we communicate back, because we care a lot about how we are perceived. And how like our words are perceived. We don't want to hurt feelings or say something out of tone, right? So I think all of those things lead us to be much better business owners, much better client service providers. And it's a superpower. It's not to say men don't add value. They do. But in fact, I love my work partner is a man. And the best thing about having a woman and a man is that we like complete that circle, and we provide two completely different perspectives. We'll take notes on the same client side by side, and I've written down completely different things than he did. Mm-hmm. But together, it's great. And so just realizing that like what you hear is effectively different, but that also can be really, really powerful and strategic and make you more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Sorry,
yeah,
I was a rant on women.
I like what you said about not coming in as a bulldog. 'Cause I do think that there's a tendency, and I was in advertising, so I was in very pretty masculine world, and had some of those interactions that are questionable. But I remember feeling like I needed to be like just this angry person and come in and just like command the room, and it's like that wasn't authentic to me. So it's like I could come across and try to do it. I couldn't maintain it because it's not me. Uh-huh. And of course it's not authentic. So everyone's like, come on, Maari. So it's much better to find what you do well and how you can use it in a situation. If you're really, really great, I mean, because gosh, I've sat in so many rooms where everybody's trying to be the funniest and the smartest in the room. And if you can sit and listen and find a way to add value at the end, then you'll cut through that noise, And I think it's like, that's one thing I really like. I love about freelancing and freelancers who can, even if they are full-time, still freelance. It gives you that power and control to be like, this is a toxic situation. I don't have to be in it. Like, I'm not going to, this guy, and I've seen this too, like a lot of times people approach these overly masculine situations as their project to fix, because again, it's like we're all fixers, and you don't have to fix them. You can try to help them be better, but you don't have to live in toxicity. You can walk away. I think that's part of it too, is like a lot of times as women, we want to try to be there to make the situation better and help. And it's like, we can stay in those situations for years, decades, even when it's like, it's not your problem you can't fix him. You can help people around you, but you don't have to live in it. And I like, that's something that I've always seen. I'm like, you should just walk away sometimes. And John and I were talking about too with negotiation a lot of times, because I like to talk. And I can get into a negotiation and then I can completely talk myself out of it, And I think say what you need to say and then stop talking. Like, that was a really great piece of advice one of my bosses gave me. Don't just say what you need to say and then just period. And then just let it sit. That's so hard to do.
It is really hard to do. And you just have to stop. So you just stop talking and just be silent and watch them squirm.
Yeah. But that is one of those things where you don't have to be a bulldog to assert your sort of control over the situation too. Anyone can sit silently, and it's not something that you have to like own the room or whatever. You just have to learn to sit with yourself and be okay with like, I've said everything I need to say. And I do like, I was in some sales training a long time ago. I used to sell, in college, I sold vacuum cleaners door to door one summer, which was
I love that.
both the best and the worst job ever. It taught me a lot. But that was one of the things that they told us. They were like, okay, after you finished vacuuming up the thing and you've shown them all the dirt in their room and you've shown them all the stuff and then you show them the price and you just don't say a word. You just show them the price and shut up. And it was incredible how if you sat there for 10 seconds, how they would just start to talk themselves into it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like mind blowing. So yeah, there's something to that for sure. So tell us a little bit about, I skipped ahead. I asked you to tell us a little bit about Rebel Women's Social Club, and then I asked you another question. And so I want to go back to that.
Yeah.
Tell us about Rebel Women's Social Club, what it does, where people can find it, and, just generally the goals for it.
Oh, yeah, so when I first got into this new career, this is really like a referral based career. Like, if you're in finance, people want to know, do you trust that person? Have you done business with this person? And the company that I work at doesn't do any sort of formal advertising or marketing at all. Like I am entirely responsible for building my own client base, kind of like very similar to a realtor, right? Mm-hmm. And so initially I was like, okay, well, I should probably do networking. And I used to sort of like, not intentionally, but I used to do a lot of networking in my old career because I was always, either trying to get better professionally and I would go to a conference or whatever it was. And you're networking and you're making all these connections. And what you don't realize is that every single person that you meet is valuable. And they might not be valuable in the sense of like, oh, they're going to bring you money, but they might teach you something. They might tell you about a resource. They might connect you to someone in the future, or they might give you the whole, I never want to work with a person like that. Like you learn something. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to start meeting more people. And I really wanted to start meeting more women because I hate to say it, but like after my divorce, all of our friends just kind of like Homer Simpsoned into the bushes, And I really felt like, I had all these women that stood by me at my wedding, and like I talked to one of them still. So, well, and my cousin, but yeah. So it's like all of these people that I thought were like close friends, sort of disappeared from both of us. Instead of picking one or the other or trying to stay friends with both of us separately, they just disappeared. And I felt really, really alone. And I also, not long after that, I was going through the layoffs and I was like, well, all the people that I talk to day in and day out were people I work with. How do I meet people? How do I make friends? What do I do? And so I joined a women's networking group. It's actually a different structure. It's called WIN, Women in Networking. And I did that for a little while and I hated it because it was all very like forced referrals. So you were like, you have to provide referrals if you join, and you can only refer to other people in the group. And like, and run by the Emily Gilmores of the world. I mean, just, yeah, it was really bad. It was not what I wanted at all. It was very like, bless your heart, Southern, talk crap about you behind your back. And it wasn't for me. And so, but a lot of the women that I had met that were also dissatisfied were like, hey, let's do something different. But nobody wanted to step up and do it. So I was like, fine. One of those things where if you want something to happen, you got to do it yourself. And so I decided to make a monthly, I call it, the social club intentionally, because it's not just about networking. So many women like self-selected out of attending certain events because they're like, well, I'm working in a B2B tech company. I don't have a reason to network, to try to get referrals. Like I'm not here to build my business. I'm here to make friends or talk socially or whatever it is. And they're over and over again, the more I expose myself to like the women's groups in the area, the more I realized that there was a huge need for women who just needed social interaction, did not know how to make friends. I think in my descriptor on the group, it says it's effing hard to make friends as adults. And I think there is, to an extent right now, there's a like-mindedness and safety, like fact of our current environment, but that isn't to say that I encourage don't talk to the other side. Definitely think that's the only way things will change is if you keep having the hard conversations. But I just realized that I really wanted a safe space to make genuine connections. And if it benefits my business or other businesses, or I'm able to bring value to them in some way, whether that's educational or, oh, hey, you are looking for this job and I knew someone and I connected you and you got hired. Great. Like that kind of thing. So it can be professional connections. It can be interpersonal. It can be support on things like, hey, do you recommend a roofer? Look at this. Did you have a good experience with this HVAC repair? So I don't think people realize that how much of our economy, especially on the female side, is run by referrals and interpersonal connections and that support system. So I created it. I wanted to create a space for that. And we meet monthly. And you said, where can you find us? So one, you have to be women or women identifying. So you can be, transgender. We're fine with that. But we wanted to keep it more female based so that there's a lot more safety and vulnerability. We meet the second Tuesday of every month at Melon Mushroom in Briar Creek. But I think, we're trying to keep it local for now. There's a Facebook group called Rebel Women Social Club. Our meetings are listed on Eventbrite. So you can search Rebel Women Social Club on Eventbrite and find our monthly sessions. But yeah, it's free. It's just hey, show up and let's talk about stuff. Sometimes I try to coordinate educational things or activities just to kind of mix it up. I think in a couple months we have a woman speaking on self-worth and self-confidence. So yeah, it's just something that's important to me. I don't get any sort of financial benefit. I just really love doing it. In fact, I would say like 50% of the time, I never even tell people what I do from.
Oh, wow.
It's just, I just get caught up in these conversations and enjoying spending time with these women.
That's cool. That's cool. So one part of that one tiny little piece that Jenna keeps highlighting over and over again in our little list here. She asked this question sort of, I guess it's partly for Rebel Women Social Club, but also partly for, I think, women helping other women in this situation. And she asks, how can women be allies for each other in their negotiations, whether that's in their negotiations for a new job or for a new opportunity, or for that matter, in getting a quote for roofing, because it sounds like that's an issue that I wasn't aware of before this conversation. So,
yeah. Well, I think it's most important to remember that not all women are true allies. And I think that's a hard lesson to learn. There's plenty of women out there who are not the type of women who truly support women, but say they do. And so trying to keep an eye out for that is important. I hate to say it, but it's real. And I think that, if you truly want to be an ally, you're not starting the interaction, the conversation, whatever it is, with what's in it for me. You're starting in how can I help? How can I help? Not what's in it for me. How can I help? If you happen to get something out of it, great. But that's not the place you're starting from. And I think that that's a really hard thing to change mentally, is just being willing to offer value with no expectation of anything in return, because so many people like to take advantage. But that's why I say you have to watch your back on the other side, right? Don't continuously give support to people who don't give back. As far as being an ally in negotiation, I mean, really helping women identify, one, their value. Like I can't tell you how much I just have conversations where someone's like, hey, can I brainstorm with you? And I'm like, yeah, but here's what I see. Here's how I see this as a positive, right? And just helping reinforce them to see where the strength is and how to speak to it, instead of poking hole in what could go wrong. I mean, it's good to bring that up and maybe talk about it a little bit, but like, hey, just be prepared for these kinds of things, but here's how you counter it. Here's where you're strong. Here's why you're good at it. Like, just constant reinforcement and sharing those resources that make a difference, whether it's referrals of professional contractors who are fair and good and will not take advantage, or, making sure that person has a seat at the table. I'll add one last thing, which is, have you heard of the difference between someone who is a connector and someone who is a sponsor
No.
in the networking world. So I used to think of myself as a connector, right? Like I have this weird invisible map. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast, but I can remember that I saw this open posting for a job and then someone randomly says they're looking for it. And I'm like, boop, like immediate connection made. And I remember stuff like that. And I'm constantly like, oh, you need to meet so-and-so. I think, oh, you both have girls at this school. Like, I don't know why I remember things like that or think to make connections like that, but I do. And I always have. And not everybody's good at that. That's one of my qualities. And you don't have to necessarily be good at that to try to add value. But I used to always call myself a connector. But the difference between a connector and a sponsor is that a connector just stops at the connection. They make the connection, they move on. A sponsor, hey, did you connect with that person? Hey, person that I connected you with, or, hey, person that I tried to make the connection to, were you able to talk to them? Did you like what they had to say? Do you find, do you have any questions about my experience with them? You're sponsoring that person's promotion in the world, in the connection. You're trying to make sure that they're the name you bring up in the room before your own. And that's truly like being a sponsor, is like championing someone else's success and following through versus just, hey, you should talk to this person. And then that's it.
Yeah.
That's a cold referral and nobody likes that.
Yeah. That's a really nice nuanced way to explain the difference. Following up and also, making sure that both sides get the connection, and then just following up to say, hey, did I read the room correctly? Was this the right person to send to you? If not, tell me some more information. Maybe I know somebody else. All of those things continually add value. I really like that definition and that nuance. So we're going to move on to our lightning round now. We're wrapping things up here. We've been talking for a little over an hour. So these are just 3 quick questions. You can answer sort of off the top of your head. The first one is, how do you hype yourself up for a heavy money conversation? Do you like jump up and down or run around the block or listen to some loud music, or do you like chill out and put the headphones on? Like, what do you do to prepare for those kind of conversations?
Well, I think if I'm really having a down day and I need to truly reinforce that, I do Amy Cuddy's power poses. So like the make yourself big in the mirror. I love the Wonder Woman pose with like the hands on the hips and while I'm doing it, I sort of, I like to do some sort of affirmation, whether it's like, and I don't mean to say like cheesy, oh, I'm, and I can't even think of a cheesy one, but like something that really means something to me, which is like, you deserve a seat at the table. You deserve to be here. You have value. What you're providing is valuable. You wouldn't suggest it if it didn't have a good reason. And even just reviewing all of the reasons that I think that value exists. So, whether it's a money conversation with billing a client for freelance work, or I have to have a lot of really hard money conversations with clients about their own personal finances. And there are days when I just don't want to have that conversation, whether it's, telling them hard news or telling them wonderful news, but like, I want to try to help them with their money. And it's like a big ask. It's all about just remembering that you deserve to be there. You're there for a reason.
I like that. Yeah. So next question. What's your best tip for keeping your dogs entertained while you work from home?
So I might be really lucky in that my dogs are pretty chill. Like they've been asleep this whole time. One of my dogs was asleep on a bed under his ex. The other dog actually went and got onto the couch. She likes to sleep on the couch, but they don't really bug me all that much. And I think part of it is I have 2 dogs, right? So 2 dogs kind of entertain themselves and they can go outside and play in the backyard for a little while. And I think a lot of people with just one dog who's like, I will say my puppy who's now about to turn 3, she likes to do this thing where she'll sit just out of camera shot and she will stare into my soul, like won't break eye contact, hardly blinks. And she's just like, Mom, you've been sitting at that desk all day and I need you to play with me. I need to go outside. But my other dog is passed out because he's older and he's just like snoring. And so she just stares me down. And, I think in that situation, eventually, as soon as I have a break, I go and I let her outside and then I come back. But, you know, I think just as important for entertaining your dogs is taking the break for yourself. So, hey, take that 5 minutes, go sit outside, make yourself a cup of tea, watch your dog lose their mind over a ball, whatever it is. Like, you need that break just as much as they do.
Yeah, good point. Good point. All right, last one. What are your favorite resources for people who want to start financial planning early in their careers?
Oh, let's see. I would say it's not a resource, but more of a piece of advice. It's just, it's never too early. You don't have to have a lot of money, make a lot of money, or spend a lot of money to be financially strategic and capable and get advice. I would say find the right source, whether that's working with a professional that you trust and like, or if you are going to find a source on the internet, make sure it works for you. I think so many people try to find that like generalized guidance of, oh gosh, I can't think of his name right now. I'm blanking on it, but the main financial guy who's like, pay off all your debt first before you save into retirement. And
right, Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey, thank you. I don't know why I was blanking on his name. But people are like, oh, well, I follow the Dave Ramsey method. I'm like, cool. Does it work for you? No, not really. Like, this doesn't make sense. So, if you're going to pick something, really start with the basics and learn the why before you take the advice. Learn the why before you take the advice, because just taking the advice doesn't mean it is good for you. What else to start? Resources. I'm sure there are books that I can't think of any off the top of my head. I should have been prepared for that question.
I mean, it's the lightning round. You don't have to have all the answers. We just ask for what's in your head,
Yeah.
Oh, good. I like that though. The idea of there are a bunch of different options and ways that you can view personal finance, and you have to find the right fit for you. Is a really good way to sort of summarize this conversation. That could be having someone like you as a personal finance person to go to and talk through all the process with. And it could be that you find somebody on the internet and you can just follow their plan and that's what works for you. It could be that, you're lucky enough to have people in your life, parents or whomever, that can help you and teach you through that. I'm on the opposite side of this. My son turned 18 last week, and the only thing he wanted for his birthday was to sign up for a brokerage account. And I was like, okay, cool. So, he's like, I have to be 18 in order to start investing and trading stocks and whatever. And he wants to learn. And so we've given him a little seed money, and he wants to learn to do it on his own and study that in school. So he's teaching me.
Porter's your retirement plan, is what you're saying.
I mean, in some ways, aren't all children, isn't that what parents hope for, is that their children will take care of them? But it's not my only retirement plan, but it is, hopefully he thinks about his old man.
Yeah.
But it is kind of, funny that sometimes that advice can come from different places. He will come home and tell me what's happening in the market, or what what the treasury yield is, or whatever is going on. And I'm like, are you paying attention in school, or are you just, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So sometimes your kids can teach you. That's all I'm saying.
Love that, because shameless plug, my best guy friend he works at Fidelity, and he's in charge of a lot of the content and UX design and a bunch of different things for the Fidelity Youth app, which is literally an educational platform to help young investors learn the whys and learn the finance and be able to invest and not, risk it all, right? Like actually understand what they're, and not, that's also a very cool resource of doing. And so young people.
I like that. We'll check that one out.
We also have to realize, like John and I, like that our history of money is very different than what our kids are getting. Hopefully, money was very taboo growing up in like the 80s and 90s, especially depending on where you came from. And so we have a lot of things that we've got to deal with before we deal with our finances. And hopefully this generation is having the conversations about money a lot earlier and demystifying and kind of removing those taboos. They could talk about it when they get in. I mean, it's probably going to be a lot of employers are going to be a little terrified, because like Porter's going to walk in and be like, this is what I want. But it's going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his goal is, he has seen me as, start businesses. I've also worked, full-time for people. I work, for Maari for our own company. And this has been the most stable, best job of my entire career. But yeah, it is. But she knows that. And because I tell her at least once a year when we have our annual review, I tell her more often than that. But yeah, I mean, I've worked for like big, Fortune 20 companies all the way down, and then I've owned my own businesses in the past and all that. And I think one of the things that he's seen, and definitely I think that Maari's kids have seen too, is that when you don't have a linear career path, in other words, I start with this company and I work for them for 40 years and then I get a retirement package and a gold watch, that kind of went away with our grandparents, I guess. Financial stability is something that goes up and down and it's kind of rocky. And if you're starting your own business and you're doing whatever, there's risk involved, and your kids see all of that and they absorb it, even if you don't recognize it or you try to hide it from them. There's no hiding it from them. They are very well aware. Even if they don't know the numbers in the bank, they can sense the stress at times. And so I think that's part of it with my son too, is he has decided from a very early age, I want a nest egg that will protect me so that as I go through these ups and downs in life, I will have a thing, which is very different from when I was younger. The idea was the nest egg was for when you're 65. And he sees it as, no, I need savings so that I can manage this. I didn't intend it, but apparently he learned it.
Well, even more so if you're a freelancer, you need a bigger cushion, because in case anybody doesn't know this, credit card debt is the worst thing you could have. Those 20 to 35% interest rates will kill you. And so, I just had a conversation today with somebody about, well, I think I'm paying the minimum, but I think that's only like 80%. I think 80% principal, 20% interest. And I was like, let's look it up. And it turns out it's 100% interest. All he's doing is paying off the interest. So he's not actually digging into that balance. And, the reality is, if you're a freelancer, if you have more financial volatility, right, you need to have a bigger nest egg.
Yeah, absolutely. I had another friend who's a financial planner tell me that the best thing that I could do for my son was to basically, start his IRA account.
Was it a Roth IRA?
The Roth IRA, yeah, as soon as possible, and put money into that. They're like, if you can do that early enough and they just never touch that, then you've done more for them after you're gone than you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And she laid it out and explained it all to me. And I was like, wow, that's really powerful, because it's the time value of money. And she's like,
advantages of a Roth IRA. You can't beat that.
And she was just like, you put it in there and just forget about it. Just forget about it. And if you get, down in there, it will, it will end up being this later on. And she's like, you can just it'll just be there and he'll have it. And it's better than having an insurance policy for him or whatever else. And I was like, oh, it's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. So it's wonderful to be able to talk to people like you, because you have all of that information. Those things that the rest of us don't really think about on a daily basis, but can help us out. And time value of money, and thinking about putting little bits of money away now to turn into, bigger pieces of money later on is really helpful. I know all those calculations. I understand, compounding interest and everything, but it seems very abstract.
Yeah.
And having somebody to put it in the concrete, I think is a wonderful value that you provide.
Thank you. With every client meeting, I try to make sure they walk away with something they didn't know before. So I just give like a little tax lesson, investments lesson, things like that. But I also, I like to say budgets are like diets. They don't work, because you might try to stick to a budget and then you blow it one weekend, and then you have a hard time getting back into it. Kind of like, working out, or, a diet where you're counting calories. Well, are you actually weighing your food on a scale so you know really how much you're eating? Or are you just measuring with your eyes and then like saying that's that many calories and you really don't know? And so most people just don't look at it, and they don't understand their cash flow. And I'm not saying that you need to budget and record everything down to the last dollar, but understanding your cash flow is step one. Step two is understanding the value of your money. So if you're spending $200 a month going to Starbucks, which I've seen, right? What could $200 a month in an investment account do, or even in a high yield savings account, right? Building that up, compounding interest, any kind of earnings on that money while you sleep is valuable.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been great. We have occupied a lot of your time.
I can nerd out on this stuff all day, clearly.
Obviously, it's your job.
Yeah. And we love it too. It's great. We love talking about money.
Yeah. It seems like you really love it and you're really passionate about it too. All right, cool. So before we go here, if people are listening, want to reach out to you directly for some financial help or advice, is there a place that they can go to? Is there a website or anything like that that we can point
NicoleGuernsey.com. So first name, last name.com.
Easy enough. Awesome. We'll put in the show notes too. Thank you so much for your time today. And have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, Maari, we're back after a few days. We talked to Nicole and had a really great conversation. And now we've had some time to digest sort of what we've talked about. So what did you think?
Well, I always enjoy conversations about money and finances, because I think that is, if not the number one question we get, it's probably like number two about how do I determine my rate and how do I negotiate rate. So I do feel like it was very important to have that conversation as a whole. And one of the things that I think you and I talked bits and pieces about a lot of the concepts we covered. And it was nice because with Nicole, we were really able to kind of put them all together into one big conversation. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think money is a touchy subject for some people, and especially when you deal with people that see themselves as creatives. A lot of times there's this sort of push-pull between I'm a creative, but I need to make money, but money scares me. But there's all of these sort of mixed emotions that go along with money. And especially when people don't see themselves as, quote, business people, then it becomes a little more complicated even. It's not as black and white or as clean. And, like if I was going to make this pen and sell this pen back and forth, I can detach from that and just look at my costs on the cost of the pen, where it's manufactured, how much does it cost me to manufacture it, and then apply a straight markup to it and go, I need to sell this pen for $5. And it doesn't feel like it's me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't attach anything to me because it's an object, it's a thing. But it's very difficult for a lot of people to do that with their work when they see it as part of who they are. And I thought that, this was a really good sort of conversation to help people understand and sort of like get rid of a little bit of that emotional baggage.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I think as creatives, we tend to be more emotional and more emotionally connected. And I think we're also go through school and go through work, like trying to be one with the emotions that are bringing us inspiration. And so we're kind of in that slant. And a lot of times it feels like money is the math side of the brain. And it's like, I'm bad at math. I don't have to deal with that because that's not supposed to be, I'm in the emotional land. And I think it's hard sometimes when we have to bring money into the conversation. And a lot of times money can it becomes harder when it is emotional. And I think it was interesting. We talked a lot about the emotional side of money, which I think is a super valid conversation, especially when you're figuring out rates, especially when you're trying to price out your work.
Right. Absolutely. Well, that brings us to our start and quit this time around. So what are you going to quit?
So I thought one of the things that you talked a lot about, and you and I have talked about this before, is don't not know your numbers. Like don't just kind of enter into negotiations or getting your rate together without doing your own research. I think it's a little bit of taking accountability that your rate is based in a data point and in facts, and is not just like this emotional side of what you're doing. And so I think it's really important that we do all that research before we go to the negotiating table, because if you're going to negotiate with data points, then it kind of removes, it's like, hey, I need to make this much because I got to pay my mortgage. I got to do this thing. I got to do that thing. And it kind of removes the like, oh, you're not valuing me as a person side of it. So I think understanding your numbers, and then also understanding that you are not, whatever number you're putting out there is tied to data. It's not tied to your self-worth, which I think is super, super important to be aware of, that you might do that, and then to work to get past it.
Yeah, absolutely. That going back to my pen analogy, you're doing the same thing. You're putting your work in the mentality of the pen, and how much it costs you to manufacture whatever work it is that you're providing for that person who's paying you. And then you're just applying a markup on top of that.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to look at it. My quit is, I really liked her perspective on the ostrich, like quit sticking your head in the sand. Mm-hmm. I think that for a lot of people, it's very tempting to just sort of go, I'm getting by, I'm paying my bills, that's good enough. And everything else is just sort of extra that I'll deal with later.
Yeah.
And, I'm 48 years old. When does later happen? Does it happen when I'm 50? Does it happen when I'm 55? Like, when is later? And that's the scary part, especially for people that don't plan, is if you stick your head in the sand, you wake up one morning, you're 65 years old, and you're like, oh no, what happened?
Yeah.
You know?
You can't be
So,
passive in your own financial understanding. You just really can't.
yeah. You do have to take some level of initiative there. So what are you going to start?
So starting, I think one of the things you mentioned kind of towards the end of the podcast that I thought was really great was understanding that every interaction you have could be a valuable part of your network, whether or not they're giving you work or whether they're making a connection. It's like, and I think you and I both feel that way because we have this kind of community mindedness, but every interaction you have, whether it's at a networking event or a PTA meeting or a business meeting, it's all a valuable extension of your network because the person you meet who might just be a cordial, like, oh, we do this together, could introduce you to the next person who could be a business lead or could introduce you to the next person. And I think that power of network, a lot of people don't understand when, especially when they first start out in business, they kind of think about it as like a transactional thing. If I meet you, then like, what are you going to give me? What am I going to give you? And that's like that's a hard way to enter into relationships. And so I think the more you can understand that network building is a constant part of what you're doing. And so it just alleviate the pressure of trying to make every single interaction like this is going to be my new business lead every time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that means also that you're just not enjoying yourself in your life. Sometimes
terrible.
you're out at a place, or even if it is a networking event or whatever, like you should still have a good time. You shouldn't just be worried about, gathering people's business cards or information and then sharing them up. I think people, a lot of times with that transactional side of things, they miss the boat when they're out at a networking event or they're out in public, or they're just, meeting new people at a barbecue over the weekend. Not everything is about gathering business cards and making connections. Sometimes it's about making just personal human to human connections. And then those a lot of times become your most powerful networking business opportunity connections too. All of us, at least a lot of the people that I know, have a hobby. I have several hobbies, and I don't go to the tennis court expecting to meet someone that is going to help me get a connection for Uncompany. But occasionally I am on the tennis court and we talk about what we're doing, and they go like, oh, hey, that's cool. Let's talk later. And actually, we might have a way to work together. But I'm not sitting there going like, okay, today I'm going to play with this guy and I'm going to go to his LinkedIn and I'm going to figure out, like, can I get a business connection out of the deal? I'm going to play tennis,
Yeah. Well, it does feel like we've probably all met people like that, where it feels like you're going to be cornered into like an MLM and you're just like, it never ends up being a good lead or a good relationship. So it's best not to enter networking or connecting with the intention of like getting something from them.
Yeah, you can't force it. It's like dating in a lot of ways too. Like you can't force someone to like you. It just has to happen. It's the same thing. Sometimes with networking, you can definitely do some things to like meet as many people as possible and to open up lines of communication, but let it happen naturally. Be authentic, be true to yourself. I think that was something else that Nicole sort of put out there.
Yeah.
So my start is to take control of your finances little by little. And I think this is something that people miss sometimes. When you start to think about your finances and what are you going to do, a lot of people go like, oh, okay, this is a big project. I need to really sit down and think about my retirement, and I need to really sit down and think about what my expenses are. And like, I'm going to get it all together this weekend. I'm going to spend a whole weekend and do my taxes and do all these things. And I'm going to be in perfect financial shape at the end of the weekend. And I think one of the things that Nicole talked about was just managing it in little bits at a time, making small decisions and changing your perspective little by little, as opposed to it's just like dieting. You can't just sit down and go like, I'm going to eliminate all the bad food in my world. I need to change my lifestyle. And that means that I need to take little chunks out. And that's also where someone like Nicole can help us, to not just to get our future finances in order, but to help us step through the process in a way that is going to be a life-changing event as opposed to just a one-time thing. It's a process. It's a lifestyle change. And she's educated in that. And so are other financial planners. And they can help you to change that mindset little by little as opposed to one big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your main takeaway?
I think that taking the emotion out of money is really huge, just because we talked a little bit about like when money is emotional, you're kind of giving away a lot of the power that you have. And she talked about it, especially from the perspective of being a female and seeing those negotiations happen, that, when you can remove emotion in a way and you're coming in, you're negotiating on data points, like we talked about, like you have power and control. When it becomes this emotional feels a lot of times, especially with money, and you don't feel comfortable, then it's a really hard place to stay focused and maintain like what your goals are. You need to start to lose a little bit of focus. And so I think it was interesting. She talked a lot about how like, make sure you're, maintaining your power. She talked about bringing in power poses, which I've heard a lot. But what you can do when you're going into those conversations, it's like, how you're going into those conversations to feel empowered. And I think part of feeling empowered is knowing your data, knowing your information quickly, doing some research on who you're talking to. I think it's also practicing, which I know we all learned as kids when we were doing various things, but practicing those conversations. So like playing it back and forth with a partner and saying like, hey, I'm negotiating for this. Here's my rate. Is that ask me these questions? I think that's really valuable. But having a combination of all of those things that we talked about, then you're going into negotiation for like a really strong point of power. And I thought like, that's a really solid takeaway to understand is like, when you're going into those conversations, make sure you're going into them really equipped with what you need to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My takeaway kind of goes along with yours a little bit. Mine was to advocate for yourself. You provide a service, whatever it is. If you're a business owner, freelancer, you provide a service and people are willing to pay for that service. If they're not willing to pay for the service, then you need to find a different service, right, to provide to people. But people are willing to pay for it. And let's assume that's the case. So then you need to know what your minimum is and what your maximum or your desired, value is. And that minimum needs to be a hard line in the sand. It needs to be something that it's your walk away number, right? Like if I'm going to go negotiate at a car dealer and I have a walk away number in my head, I need to stick to it. I can't change it because then that alters my plan. So understand and know what your minimum is, know what your desired rate is, and then work in between those two. And one of the things that I learned in my 5 years selling art at the art gallery was the power of the takeaway. This is when you sell something, if people are interested in it and you start to take it away from them, they will reach for it. Like, and I've had people physically reach for it as I like, oh, well, you don't want this painting, then apparently, I can only go this, and I put it to the side, and they would actually physically reach out their hands and go, well, and it's interesting, the power of that takeaway. So don't be afraid to say, this is my minimum and I'm sorry, but I don't think this is going to work out. A lot of times people will come back with it. Well, what if we could do this instead? Mm-hmm. And that's a really powerful place for you to be because now you have the negotiating leverage. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the things that I thought was really interesting when she talked about sort of having that minimum and then having your desired or your maximum and working within that. But understand that it's okay to walk away sometimes. And often, as we've seen, the ones where people are only focused on price, those are usually the more difficult projects and the more difficult clients. And sometimes if you walk away based on price, you're dodging a big bullet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if someone is pushing you hard on price and you're willing to say no, and there's just kind of being sticklers about it. Or I've seen this too, where people make you feel bad about your rate. Oh, well, so-and-so I worked with last week charged this much less. And if you can say like from a really not snarky, but from a strong place, like that's great. Like you should go with that vendor. Like, then you're right. People are like, well, wait a second. So I do feel like if you have the opportunity to negotiate and know your rate and feel solid about it, and you have the ability to walk away, then you're in the best. You are in control of the conversation, and you could still walk away from it and not get that work, but you'll feel this like lift of like, that's right, I'm legit when you do that. So that's a nice place to get to.
Yeah, when you get to the place where you can turn down work because it's not interesting to you or because the value isn't there or whatever the reason is, it is a very empowering place to be. Mm-hmm. And it is our goal, to help freelancers to feel that, I think, and to feel that empowerment. And sometimes that is early on in your journey, just doing it once to get it underneath, to get it inside of you or underneath your feet, that feeling, so that you start to get comfortable with it, just like with any other kind of fear or pain or struggle. Saying no isn't the end of the world. It's actually, no's a complete sentence and it can be a good thing.
Agreed.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun. It was great sort of recapping this one too. There was so much, and we will definitely try to have Nicole back in the future to talk about some more topics related to finances if people are interested in that. Right. So thanks to everyone for listening today. And thanks again to Nicole and to all of our listeners that are out there. We will be back in a few weeks with another episode. And until then, I'm John.
And I'm Maari.
And we're reminding you that winners can quit and quitters can win. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not necessarily represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Command Q or Uncompany.